Hi, everybody. It's Caroline Leavitt for another edition of Friday Frontliners. And we have an incredible guest today, Amy Bloom. She's going to be talking about her book, which is absolutely incredible. And I want to tell you a few housekeeping things first, but let me tell you about A Mighty Blaze first. A Mighty Blaze was co-founded by me and author Jenna Blum the day of lockdown. When authors, including myself, lost their tours, bookstores had their doors shuttered, and readers who were used to connecting with authors on some level, either through readings or, whatever, or interviews, just lost that too. So we're now going on 6 years, and thank you to all of you who have supported us and listened to us. And I want to say that today's interview is going to be always on our YouTube station on YouTube, so you can watch it whenever you want, and it will be a podcast most likely in a few months. So on the right, you're going to see a chat if you haven't been here before. And what that is that just tells you links where you can buy Amy Bloom's books. You can go to your favorite indie. We always tell people bookshop.org is a wise choice because they'll help you find the right indie, and they have all of Amy's books. I've also put up some of Amy's stellar reviews, and you can look at that too. So before I introduce our guest, I want to tell you a little bit, give her an introduction. Amy Bloom is the author of 4 novels, White Houses, Lucky Us, Away, and Love Invents Us, and 3 collections of short stories, Where the God of Luck Hangs Out, Come to Me, which was a finalist for the National Book Award, and A Blind Man Can See How Much I Love You, also a finalist, this time for the National Book Critics Circle Award. Her most recent book is the wildly acclaimed New York Times bestselling memoir, In Love. She's written for just about every magazine you can think of, including The New Yorker, New York Magazine, The New York Times Magazine, Vogue, and Elle. Her short stories have appeared in Best American Short Stories, the O. Henry Awards, and numerous others. Her work has been translated into 17 languages. Fun fact, Amy Bloom has written many pilot scripts for cable and network TV, and she created, wrote, and ran the short-lived series State of Mind, starring one of my favorite actresses, Lily Taylor. She is both a psychotherapist and a novelist. So let's talk about her amazing book. It got a starred review from BookPage, one of the top 10 books. NPR called it Best New Books for Summer 2025. The Guardian called it Books to Look Forward to in 2025. Kirkus raves, full of surprises, wild leaps and turns, and many fascinating people who love each other. The LA Times has a superb review. Once again, Amy Bloom shines her brilliant attention on families bound by love and history. Exquisite. The Boston Globe says, short in length, but contains multitudes. A little Walt Whitman there. A multi-generational novel of family, war, immigration, love, and loss. The book is full bursting with characters, settings, perspectives, and more. The Washington Post raves, probing, ambitious. The hallmarks of Bloom's prose are present. Graceful psychological insights, palpable love for her characters, and a story that lands squarely on the side of life and living. It's also unflinching in its depictions of suffering. And I realized I didn't mention the title. I'll Be Right There. It's a super title for a super book. I'll Be Right There boomerangs from World War II to modern times, from occupied Paris to Poughkeepsie. It's the story of 2 orphan Algerian youths and their found family through the generations. It's deeply moving, funny, and incredibly haunting too. And I'm just thrilled to welcome Amy Bloom, legend. Thank you for coming on A Mighty Blaze, Amy.
I'm so glad to be here. I love that this came about because you wanted writers to be able to connect to the readers.
Oh, yeah.
So very
Oh
good.
yeah, that was the lockdown was such a lonely time for everybody anyway. And the thing is that the blade literally saved all our lives when we were building it, because in the beginning it was just two of us and then three of us, and we were working like 20-hour days, but it was fine because we didn't have to think about what was going on outside. So anyway, I hate the question, where do you get your ideas? Because, if writers knew where we got our ideas, we'd have them all the time. But I love to know somewhat of the inception story. Like, what kinds of things were you thinking about that grew into this exquisite novel? What was haunting you?
I think there were two things. One was new and one was old. The old one is that I come from a family whose history, from the point of view of the family, begins in about 1915. Nobody in my family, none of my greats, my great aunts, my great uncles, my grandparents, nobody ever talked about life in the old country. Life began when they came to America. And that's just the way it was. But it didn't provide me with a lot of information.
Right.
So there was always that, which is, who were these people before they were the little old ladies and the little old men and the guys with their belts up under their rib cages? Who were they before? So that's always been present for me in my wish to know. And the other thing, I think, was I was a great admirer of Colette's as a writer, not so much as a human being. And I found, as I sort of followed through her life, and then I found the memoirs of her third husband, Maurice Goudequet, who doesn't get the kind of press her first two husbands got.
Mm-hmm.
Were domineering, big, swaggering, artsy figures. And the end of her marriages with them was sort of famous and fodder for lots of speculation, but not so much about the third husband, who she adored, who was 17 years younger than she was and Jewish, and put her in very different positions from the ones that were comfortable for her. And she persisted and loved him and protected him as he protected her until the day she died. And I just found myself wanting to go back to Colette a little bit, not the sort of fabulous monster that she was as a writer, but also who she might have been backstage. I think I'm always interested in backstage.
It is, and well, you said something really interesting that people of older generations often do not want to talk about stuff. My grandmother escaped the Tsar in Russia, and she refused to talk about it. That was the past. It was not part of the present. But one of the things that I love so much about this book is that the past is very much a part of the present. All these things merge as the characters merge. So not only do the decades shift, but you move into different characters' points of view. You move from first person to third person, and it's absolutely seamless. So I'm always curious why writers structure things the way they do. And I'm always curious in the hopes that I can learn from that. So did you always know that this was going to be the structure, or did it just feel right? Did it surprise you?
I think what I knew was that it was not going to be tidy. That's what I knew. And I had to make my peace with that. Life is not tidy. Family is certainly not tidy. No. And I wanted a book that contained some of that. I mean, some of my favorite family novels, the structure is not linear. It's not tidy. You move from point of view to point of view, because there are two things. One is that is how memory is.
Right.
Memory is constantly molting and shifting and adapting and changing depending on where we are in our lives. And so I wanted some of that fluidity in the narrative. And I also wanted to be able to move from person to person, and from how you see things when you are 16 in occupied Paris to how you see things when you are 68 and the owner of a small department store in Poughkeepsie, New York. You are also the same person, and you are also quite different.
That's right. That's right. I can remember a therapist once told me, where I was saying, why do we have to go over the same things? And she said, because you change. When you're looking at something when you're in your 20s, you're going to think about it very differently when you're in your 50s because you're a different person. And that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. I wanted to also to ask you, this novel feels so timely to me in the way that families change and they form and they grow old. And I love that the two characters, Sammy and Gazella, give birth to this wonderful, unexpected, and unconventional family. To me, that's like one of the wonderful things about being in the world today, that people can have these different families. But I wanted to ask you, why do you think the idea of non-traditional families are so terrifying to some people in this country, when these unconventional families are not harming them in any way or intruding on their way of life, but there's still this feeling of terror that I get? Why do you think that is?
Well, I can't necessarily get to the psychological root of a bunch of people I don't know.
Right.
But it is my experience that if you are deeply distressed by behavior that has no impact on your own life and is not causing, for example, harm or destruction to other people. Like, I get why if you're walking down the street and you see somebody beating their dog, you are upset about it. Why, if you're walking down the street and you see a very large woman in a very skimpy outfit, that would upset you. That would seem to suggest
Right.
something more with
Something.
more of the observer than with the observable fact. And I think it's the same way with families. It's like, as a very old friend of mine, this is a lady in her 80s, said to me, "Oh, if you don't believe in gay marriage, definitely do not marry a gay person."
That's right.
And I'm sort of like, if your position on these things is anything other than that, I suspect that that's a you problem, not a them problem.
Right, exactly, exactly. There were some things in the novel that I just loved, where this family, they call their forebears the Greats. Can you talk about that, please? I love that the Greats, it works on so many different levels, and it's just the perfect title for these people.
Well, my aunts and uncles were almost always my great aunts and uncles. And I did think of them as the greats. I thought of them as these sort of pillars, these kind of slightly distant, but also very present figures, some of them kind, some of them just distant, but people whose presence was central. There's a picture of me. I'm about 8 or 9, and all of the greats are around this picnic table at a park not far from my house. And everybody is there to play pinochle, and everybody has taken out the food that they have brought from home, whatever it is. And I feel when I look at that photo, even now, like, oh, this is the grove that I grew out of. Some of them close, some of them just present, but not so engaged. Nevertheless, this is the forest that I grew in. And I wanted to sort of acknowledge the greats and the role that they play, and also the mysteries that they contained.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of one of the reasons that I have the next generation, Lily and Bee, is that they're always trying to understand who these people are. And at the same time as being very much affected by them, also trying to go, could I see a little more? Could I see a little? Could I get another glimpse of this? Could this be a little clearer?
I love that. I love that. You've been able to find humor in terrible, tragic situations, both fictional and real. Do you have any advice to those of us who are struggling? How do you do that?
I mean, I think some of it's just one's nature. And okay, well, so my grandmother, when I was a young teenager, we took her to see the first production of Fiddler on the Roof with Zero Mostel.
Right.
An amazing experience for me. And my father was very pleased with himself. He had gotten the tickets. We had taken my grandmother. I think their relationship was okay, but maybe not fabulous. And on the way out, now I can see that he is very pleased with himself. We've all been deeply moved. And he turns to my grandma and he goes, "So, what did you think? Anatevka, huh? Very much like the village she came from." And she goes, "Oh, yeah, much nicer than where I came from." He was very funny about it. And
Right.
also the truth. So I think I come from a long line of people
Right.
who are cracking jokes on the deathbed. And some of that is just natural and some of that is defensive. And I appreciate it in all the different circumstances. I also remember giving a reading, and there were two people in the front, a woman in her early 30s and a woman, I would say, in her 70s. And the young woman said to me, "I don't understand how you can write these terrible situations that this young woman finds herself in. It's so painful. It's so awful, so brutal. I don't know how you could even imagine such a thing." And the old lady pats her on the knee and goes, "How nice that it's hard for you to imagine."
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's incredible. I want to talk about something. You had this thing on your website about 10, it was an essay, 10 things I wish I'd known. Yep, I dug it up and I loved it. I loved it. You said one of the things was keep your eye on the prize and your hand on the plow, never give in. The other one was love and care can help us through the toughest of times. I just thought this is absolutely superior advice. And the one that I loved the most was number 3, which was pick kindness over everything because everything else fades. This was actually the one piece of advice my own mom gave me when I was torn between two guys. My mother said, just pick the one who's kind because everything else will go away. And it was the one time I felt, you know what? She was absolutely right. So the first thing I want to ask you is, do you still practice these 10 things that you wish you had known?
Yeah, I'm pretty mindful of them. I mean, I raised my kids, they would all say to you, I raised my kids, be kind and take no shit.
That's great. You actually did an interview with your daughter, Sarah Moon, who's also an author. I watched it. I loved it. It was like such a great report. I thought, when I'm the parent of a grown son who's in his 20s, and there's something, excuse me, wonderful about that age where you can relate to your kid in a different way. So I wanted to know, did you know that Sarah was going to be a writer early on? Do you trade pages? How does she inform your writing or vice versa? Or do you keep that separate?
We do share our work. And when Sarah says to me, "Could you take a look at this?" I am honored and I am delighted. And I also like to share my pages with her because she's an excellent reader as well as an excellent writer. Our lanes are different, which I think is probably nice for both of us. I wouldn't even know how to write a YA novel, let alone one for middle school students. And I think she does it with such insight and such skill and such wit. I'm just, utterly admiring. And I wouldn't know how to go about doing those books. And so we're lucky that we can share that with each other. And, we have certain writerly habits in common. Neither of us writes long. We like the doorstops. We go for the one that you can put in your back pocket. And it's been a joy. I didn't know that she was going to be a writer, but she did in, I think, second grade, write an 18-page book called Cats of 18th Century France.
Oh, do you still have it?
Probably somewhere.
Oh, that's great.
And I thought, oh, you don't see this every day.
That's wonderful. That's completely wonderful. Yeah, my son wrote a novel when he was 12 called The Movies of Doom, and we asked him, do you want to publish it like a real author? And he said, absolutely. So we gave him a little author bio, and I got blurbs from friends of mine for the book, and he got a little taste of that. So there's a bit of heady advice in the book. It's another line that I love. You have the chance to be the person you wish to be until you die. And it's interesting because in the novel, people are hustlers. One does massage therapy, though it's not, the kind of dicey massage. How do you think, I'd love it if you could talk about how your characters form and reform their identities.
Well, I think that people do. I think you do if you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
There is one way to go through life, which is that every time you hit an obstacle or a disappointment, you just insist on being more of who you are. And that's one way to go. Nothing wrong with that. Another way is you go, oh, is there something I have done to make this worse? Could I go another way?
Right.
And you're either willing to or you're not. And it depends. There's a great line in Jane Austen, I think, in which in Persuasions, she says to her aunt says, I gave you very good advice telling you not to marry the sailor. And the woman says to her, well, surely the way we gauge good advice is how it turns out.
Right.
That's
right.
I can advise people, oh, you might want to do this, you might want to do that. But in the end, we pursue things as we are. I think the opportunity to correct course
Mm-hmm.
is a wonderful opportunity. It's the same way I feel about rewriting as a novelist. To me, revision is the opportunity of a lifetime.
What is your writing day like? What's a typical writing day for you?
I usually go to Pilates in the morning first.
Oh.
I won't get there. And then I come home and I sit at my desk, and I stare out the window and I eat Ritz crackers and I curse my fate and I try to get down to it.
I wanted to also ask you about screenwriting. You wrote for Longmire, correct? It's a great show.
I consulted on Longmire.
You consulted on it. Okay.
I wrote some things with Greer Shepherd and Mike Robbins before then, but I only consulted on Longmire.
Okay. Right. I know that writing for screen is very different than writing novels. Everything is much more visual. You're not so much interiority. How has one informed the other? And do you prefer novel writing form over scripts, or do you like them both equally?
Well, I love writing scripts, first of all, because they're collaborative. So it's never just my fault.
Oh.
When I'm writing a novel, there is no one to blame but me. And with scripts, you got a producer, you got a director, you got actors, somebody gets pregnant, somebody forgets the dialogue, it gets dark 20 minutes earlier, the joke doesn't land, and everybody is scrambling together. And I do really love that cooperation and that collaboration. But also, I wouldn't say I like it, but I value the sitting down by myself and wrestling my way through it for as long as it takes. And I mostly am willing to wrestle for a really long time. And that's the difference with when you're writing for TV and you're doing a live show.
You've got to be fast.
Right? You got to get the problem solved. And I love that because I am a problem solver, but I also like the opportunity to wrestle and sort out and make it as good as I know how to make it. And that I can only do in a novel.
Let's talk about what you just said, that you're a problem solver. How does that work out in writing novels? You're also a psychotherapist. Do you find yourself, when you have a character issue, that you psychoanalyze them as characters? Or how do you do that?
I don't think it's a really different technique. I think that that's my nature. I think that if I had never been trained as a psychotherapist and never put pen to paper, I would still be the same person who is deeply interested in humans. It's like my favorite subject. I really do. I love gardening. I have a lovely garden. But what's interesting to me is people. And the gap between what people say and how they behave and how they really feel is always enormously interesting to me. So it's not as if I have to like apply a therapeutic technique. This is how I think about people, and you don't have to be a Freudian to think that behavior has meaning.
Right.
Most of us who write for a living believe that behavior has meaning. And so it's just understanding, what am I showing? What am I telling? And what is the character showing? And what is the character telling? And is there something interesting between what they say and what they do?
That's
And
right.
can I get into that crack? Because that crack is what's always interesting to me.
Oh, you have an audience question. They want to know, what would we be surprised to find on your night table in terms of books?
Well, I don't know what people would be surprised, because you never know how people see you. There's always a couple of mysteries, some good, some bad. There is a guide to colloquial Italian, from which I have learned one of my favorite Italian expressions.
Oh, what's that?
In the face of disaster, che casino. It's like, what a catastrophe. I like
Oh, okay, casino. That's great. That's great.
Let's see, there's something else there. Right now I have a book by my friend Jane Hirschfield, a big compendium of her poetry called The Asking. It takes up a lot of space. It's a big book. It's not that big a nightstand. Everything that's there, plus a note from one of my granddaughters saying, "Dear Nana, thank you so much for the box of candy," because she's at camp. And she said, "May I suggest sending something else?" And then she has a little list of things.
Oh, that's incredible. What did she suggest?
Well, she wanted a plushie. She wanted a different kind of candy that wouldn't melt. And there was something else. So whatever it was, I sent it to her. That was also part of my reading material.
That's wonderful. I have one last question for you, which is, this question probably shows more about me than it does about you, but what's obsessing you now and why?
Well, obsessed is a strong word. I think that because I have so many deep concerns and like real anxiety
Right.
in our country, I work very hard not to be obsessed by that.
Okay.
Allow myself some news watching. It turns out that this novel that I wrote about immigration and the rise of fascism and the possibility of resistance, I did not intend to echo so strongly with my America.
Right.
That was not my intention, and it wasn't my expectation, but boy, I have been astonished to find again and again and again the repetition, and you just keep thinking,
it's circular.
People, did you not read it before? Did you miss the 1930s?
Right.
I try not to be obsessed by that, which results in my having a tremendous interest in my garden, in my family, in my friends, and in various forms of summer salads.
Oh, from your garden? From your garden?
Yeah, so those are the things I focus on.
It's very funny that I wanted actually to talk about the cover, which has all these lush fruit on it, and there's a lot of recipes in there. What's the meaning of food to the characters, and what's the meaning of food to you personally?
Well, I like to cook. I was raised by a lovely woman who hated to cook and was a terrible cook. So I learned how to cook sort of in self-defense. And I became a mother at a fairly young age. And so the ability to get dinner on the table for 5 people in under 25 minutes was a real value for me. And it makes you attentive. I mean, you have to figure out, how do you saute without burning? How do you cook without overcooking? How do you get food ready at the same time, and how do you find things that everybody will eat? And so that was very good training. And now I get to cook more for fun, but I still like to, and I do. I love recipes. I will go to my grave madly in love with Nigella Lawson.
Oh, yeah.
And also, I will go to my grave madly in love with Laurie Colwin, who wrote one of my
Right.
favorite books about cooking, home cooking
Home cooking.
and more
Home
home
cooking.
cooking. Yep.
Yeah, she used to live 2 streets away from me when I lived in Chelsea, and I always would walk around hoping to run into her, and I never did. So I want to say to everybody who's here, thank you so much for being here. I want to remind you, we made it really easy for you to get all of Amy's books. All of them are spectacular. Bookshop.org. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for listening. Tell your friends that this will be on our YouTube station. And Amy, spectacular book. I'll be right there. Thank you so much for being on here. This was just an absolute honor. And anytime you want to come on, you're now like a regular on A Mighty Blaze. So you can come on whenever you want to talk about whatever you want. So I will see all of you probably next week. And Amy, I'll see you in like 2 minutes when I sign up.
Love it.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.